What's up, everybody? Welcome to Orange Bloods Live on a Saturday night. Breaking news as the Texas Longhorns, they finally get that five-star talent in the 2025 class that everybody has been coveting for weeks and months. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Jason Sukamel. Like, subscribe, comment on the page. Jump into the Specs chat if you're with us live. Jonah Williams, linebacker slash safety slash general bad mother, no matter where he lines up on a football field. Out of Galveston Ball is officially a Texas Longhorn. Jason, it's weird that we're here. I don't know that 3 months ago, if you'd said this is how all of this was going to unfold, I don't know that I would have believed you, but yet here we are. Forget about all the background and the backdrop and the Texas needed this for momentum and they needed this for the 2025 recruiting class. He's an incredible prospect, and it's exciting to think that you and I get to cover this guy for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and I bet Zach, our baseball guy, is excited too. You say he's incredible on the football field. He's incredible on the baseball diamond as well. But, you know, I watched this film again today, Catch, just a refresher. Not that I really needed it, but we had time to kill, right? And he just makes it look so easy. It's effortless. You know, as a defender, you know, he's got multiple pick sixes where he's taking them back 100 yards. He's physical, you know, in his tackling. He's physical. He can come up and run support. He can tackle out in space. He really breaks down. You see him on special teams making plays. And like I'm watching, I'm like, it just doesn't even look like he's trying. He's doing all these things, and it just comes so naturally to him. Good instincts. I mean, he really is the total package. Thus the 5-star ranking. He certainly backs it up. So huge day for Texas. Huge commitment. Biggest one of the year so far. You know, they got another 5-star. They're chasing Jamie French. Less than a week, he'll announce. But huge commitment for Texas. You know, I've looked at this has Texas up to the number 11 in the recruiting ranking. So Texas just keeps, you know, this is back-to-back days. They've added commitments. They keep kind of climbing those ranks. And I expect that number, that team ranking number 11, I expect that number to keep getting lower and lower. I think they're going to keep adding commitments, but today was certainly a big day. You can make a case probably the biggest day of the 2025 recruiting cycle for Texas so far.
Jason, your connection sucks. No other way to say it. If you could leave and then try to come back and see if we can get a little bit of a cleaner connection while Jason does that, I'll let everybody know the rankings of Jonah Williams. We'll take a super chat. Rivals.com, 5-star, number 20 nationally, number 6 in the state of Texas. That's his lowest ranking. 5 stars, number 20 nationally, number 6 in the state of Texas. When we talk about this guy being an elite of the elite prospect, ESPN has him ranked as a 5-star, number 8 overall nationally. On3 has him as a high 4-star, but I wouldn't pay attention to a whole lot of that. They've got him at number 16 nationally, so it would appear that more than anything else, they just don't have that many 5 stars yet. Jason, I do think that is a little bit better. 24/7 has him as a 5-star, the number 7 overall prospect nationally. No matter how you look at it, we're talking about a national top 20 guy and a guy that inside the state of Texas is a top 5 prospect in a year that is incredibly deep. He's just an immense talent. I think pound for pound, there's not a better football player than Jonah Williams in the state of Texas. He can play linebacker. He can play safety. He returns kicks. He can play wide receiver. If he just wanted to be a wide receiver, I think he would rank as a super blue chip at that as well. He's just an amazing football player. He's my favorite football player in the state of Texas in this class. And Jason, I got to admit, like 3 months ago, didn't think we'd be watching Jonah Williams up close at the collegiate level. It felt like Texas had much better chances with Decorian Moore. It felt like Texas had better chances with a guy like Michael Fasusi. And 3 months ago, look, Texas still hasn't gotten its official visit. He's announced his commitment to Texas without taking the official visit. The unofficial visit that he took back at the end of July was a big, big deal. But it's still a unique recruitment. It's, by the way, good to have you. You look much better now. You're not choppy or anything like that.
I'm hardwired in. I'm not even Wi-Fi. I don't know what happened there, but
sometimes Restream is just a little wonky, and all it takes more times than not is just a little reset. Real quick, we'll take our first super chat. Uh-oh, there it is. Tom G says, is Jonah Williams the kind of talent that can compete for day one as a starting job? Jason, what do you think?
Man, they've got some really good safety talent on the roster, but I do think so. I mean, could he come in and beat out a Xavier Filsaime? I mean, absolutely. I mean, he's going to be competing against other 5-star type talents, assuming he stays at safety. Now, do they maybe try to find some unique packages for him, kind of put him in a linebacker hybrid type role? We'll see. We'll talk about that moving forward. I mean, he's coming in with the idea of being a safety, but we'll see what the long-term holds. But could he compete for a day one starting job? Tom G, I'm not going to put it past him. He's going to have a lot of good talent in front of him, but I think he is that good where that is certainly within the realm of possibility.
I think a lot will come down to what does the beginning of 2025 look like for Jonah Williams. Is he an early enrollee? Do we know about that?
I don't know if he's going to play baseball in the spring. He would not be, but I'm hoping. Listen, I may get a phone call from Jonah here in a little bit. That'll be one of the questions I'll ask him if he is. So, I'm trying to recall, Catch. I don't think I've ever talked to him about that.
Well, the thing is, if he shows up early and participates in spring,
I think football, he is. I'm sorry to interrupt. I think he is, but I need to confirm that.
How much baseball does he play? If he comes in early, how much football does he play in year one? If he's completely dedicated to football, he's the best safety out of all. Look, Texas has landed some incredible safeties. Derek Williams is a young player in year number 2. The moment he committed, you had a lot of Texas football players who watched film say that they thought he was a future pro and one of the best safety prospects they'd seen in a long time. Jelani McDonald, kind of the same thing, another big-time football player who is starting to assert himself in year 2, getting himself reps with the ones. Definitely in the 2 deep, a guy to watch out for this season. And Jason mentioned it, Xavier Filsaime. This is a guy that was a 5-star, committed to Florida, switches over to Texas. The Longhorns have not had problems recruiting the safety position. Give Blake Gideon a lot of credit for that. It's, for all of all fans want to see better production on the defensive side of the ball. The secondary wasn't great a year ago. Blake Gideon's done a very good job. It was interesting that Jonah Williams mentioned Blake Gideon, first name out of his mouth, when he was asked in doing, it was shown on On3's national YouTube page. And when whoever that guy was, I wasn't really paying attention, but whoever it was that asked, why did you pick Texas? He mentions Blake Gideon, first name out of his mouth.
Let me tell you, if I can jump in. I mean, Jonah was, going back a year and a half almost, Texas was heavily involved. And then Texas kind of started recruiting him as a linebacker. Jeff Choate did, who's no longer at Texas, of course. Then Texas really fell off. So Blake Gideon comes back in after Choate leaves and says, my man, I want you as a safety. I want you in my room. And Blake Gideon, listen, people, rail on him for whatever reason, but Blake Gideon is a huge reason why Jonah Williams is a Texas Longhorn commitment. So you mentioned it. Jonah mentioned Blake, first name out of his mouth when he was asked, what led him to Texas. But not only did Blake Gideon win this recruitment, he really had to reel Jonah back in when Texas had almost fallen out of the race.
Yeah, I mean, the end of June, Texas was way back. Now, I think the Jim Schlossnagle hire on the baseball side of things is probably the thing that kicked the door open back for Texas, that there was definitely a thought of immediately Jonah Williams said, look, I'm going to go check out Texas. And then they kind of did it from there. But you think about that unofficial visit that they took, spent a lot more time with the football team than he did with the baseball coaches. The Longhorns made up a lot of ground here. And, man, absolutely necessary when you consider what else has happened in recruiting. I did not have Jonah Williams comes in at the end of August to save the day on my Longhorn recruiting bingo card a month and a half ago, and yet here we are. Another super chat from Oscar. Not to take from Sark, but this is a Jim Schloss pickup more than anything else, isn't it? Or am I off the mark? Oscar, I'll let Jason follow up on this in a second. He does, again, Schlossnagle, I think, is a big part of this. But it's not an accident that he mentions Blake Gideon. in order for this to happen, as much as he liked Schlossnagle, the football side of things had to be perfect because that is first and foremost, I think, the way Jonah Williams defines himself as an athlete. If he were it reminds me of the Bo Jackson line, football is my wife and baseball is my mistress. Maybe that's not quite the way Jonah Williams would describe it. But if baseball were his wife, I think he'd be getting ready for the Major League Baseball draft in 12 months, and football would be on the back burner. He's been pretty open about the fact he absolutely wants to play college football, and that's kind of driven the train more than anything else. It's a big coup for Texas baseball because of what's happened with football helping pull Jonah Williams in. They will add a potential difference-making baseball talent. Dustin McComas has raved about his upside as a baseball prospect. At worst, he's a lefty who throws mid-90s. So at worst, you've got a guy that you can bring out of the bullpen that has an arm that would excite major league scouts. He's a lot more than that. And I don't know that Texas has really had an athlete quite like this in a long time. I mean, Ricky Williams was probably this type of athlete, but he signed pro baseball to play with the Phillies. So it wasn't a dual sport at the University of Texas. I'm hard pressed to think of anybody. Maybe you'd have to go back to Shea Morenz to really find a guy who baseball player and a football player. And so it's a unique moment in the history of the football program. How does all of this gel together will be a little bit to be determined, because there's no obvious. Had they gotten Deuce Robinson a couple of years ago, we'd have a better idea of how this might look. Instead, this follows in that line. And again, I'm pretty excited as just a media guy. I'm a big Jonah Williams fan. I just love the guy as a football player, and the idea that this is a guy that we're going to get to watch both on the football and baseball side of things means that it's real possible that almost, if you think about the next 36 months, once he arrives, if he's playing baseball and then playing football at the same time, it's going to be a whole lot of Jonah Williams over the course of a 12-month yearly calendar, just a couple of months off during the summer. And then it's Jonah Williams time pretty much from beginning of the school year until the end.
Yeah, we'll be talking about him quite a bit, on the football field and the baseball diamond. To Oscar's question there, I don't really agree with that, Oscar, that this is a Schloss pickup more than Sark or the football staff. What we have been hearing, and been reporting on Orange Bloods for several weeks now, is that this was going to be predominantly a football decision. And then the baseball thing, I'm not saying it didn't play a part, of course, but it was more secondary. And, I've heard, hey, the Texas baseball coaches, now when Jonah visited Texas in July, when he visited Texas in July, he did do a FaceTime call with Schlossnagle, okay? So there was some recruiting, but it wasn't like the baseball staff was super aggressively recruiting him and talking to him every day. This was very much more of a football decision with baseball. It just seemed to fit, especially when Schloss came over. That obviously elevated the baseball side for Texas. But, I don't know how you quantify it. That'd be a question for Jonah. But, if it's 75-25 or what the number would be. But everything I have been hearing is this was very much more of a football decision than it was a baseball decision. It just happened to work out pretty well. Hey, Schlossnagle's in Austin. They got a really good baseball program, a really good baseball coach. So it worked out well for Texas.
It's going to be real interesting watching him play this season, Jason. In fact, if anybody wants to go to Huddle, I believe they posted the highlights from his scrimmage last night. I think they were scrimmaging Santa Fe. I'd have to go back and look and see exactly what it was off the top of my head. But Williams, the camera angles were weird on the Huddle film, but I'm pretty sure he had a pick six last night. This guy specializes in big plays. I think he had 6 pick sixes a year ago. He's a dangerous wide receiver. He returns kicks. He's a touchdown at the high school level waiting to happen. And I'm real interested to follow this season, follow how his body develops. I wonder, Jason, if baseball weren't a thing, I wonder what his body looks like with 3 or 4 years at the high school level in an off-season workout program where he's lifting weights all the time. He's building up his body. The one thing that you would say about Jonah Williams is that as good of a looking kid as he is, I mean, he looks like $1 million when you watch him on the field, but he's been a guy that's played baseball. He's been a guy that's run track. He's been a guy that's played basketball. Obviously, he plays football. He's not been a guy that's had really any off-season workouts. And for him to be 6'3", a strapping 200 pounds, maybe even 205, it feels like he's a few biscuits away from maybe being an outside linebacker. My data from all of my NFL research shows that the sweet spot for linebackers from the state of Texas, the ones that end up going pro, is somewhere between 212 and like 219, that most of the best players as prospects were in the teens when they were in high school. Williams isn't that far away. He's got the exact right height that you're looking for. And I feel like if that guy had been lifting weights and working out and going through full offseason programs at Galveston Ball, I think there's a real good chance he's not 200 pounds. So what happens with his body moving forward will tell a big part of the story of where he goes.
Well, Rivals actually has him listed as an outside linebacker, which I don't really agree with. I mean, I think people are recruiting him as a safety. That's what his intentions are. But you're right. He gets in a college weight program. It can go one of two ways. He's going to have to make the mental commitment to like, okay, I want to bulk up and be a hybrid linebacker, or hey, mentally, I need to commit to not gaining too much weight so I play myself or gain weight and take myself out of the safety position. I think he prefers to play safety. So, he'll add some muscle mass, but I think he'll try to stay pretty lean. He's not going to come in and just, pack in, thousands and thousands of calories and just try to bulk up. He's going to probably gain lean muscle mass. But you're right. I mean, he's not a kid who's lived in the weight room as, some guys his age already have. So he's still got some fine tuning with his body, but long term, I don't know where to project him. Marshall Levinson from Rivals said today, he's like, I posted in my Orange Bloods commitment story, like, hey, we've got him as a linebacker because that's ultimately where we think his body will go. And they may be right. I mean, if he gets up to 225 or something, it might be tough to play safety, but you know what? He's tall and long. I mean, I don't know. He might be able to carry 220 and still play in the defensive backfield. But, those questions are 2-3 years down the road, I think. I think he comes in as a safety. That is where his head is. That's where his heart is. And I think that's where he'll get his first look.
DeMarvion Overshown had a similar mindset coming in. Different body and not the same prospect, but Demo shows up and plays safety early in his career. And there were a lot of people when he was in year one at Texas, and mostly playing a lot of special teams, seeing a little bit of backup action. There were a lot of people who thought, play him at linebacker now, we're wasting time watching him play safety. Eventually he does move to linebacker and obviously ends up being a guy that's a starting linebacker in the NFL right now for the Dallas Cowboys. I tend to think of Jonah as a DB. I think when I watched a young DeMarvion Overshown, I was able to see the linebacker upside a little bit more than I do. I think Jonah could easily play linebacker. And look, if he shows up and quickly gets to, let's say, 215, the only guys they have at that weak side linebacker, once David Benda and Maurice Blackwell are gone after this season, and neither of those players has a COVID year remaining, like this is it, then you're talking about Ty Anthony Smith, who's had a really good camp, but I don't think is going to knock the doors down and just take a starting job. He's third team right now. I don't quite know how much he's going to play. And then you've got Darren Gillette, who hasn't been so good at linebacker that they didn't say no over my dead body when they needed help at running back. Nobody said we can't afford to do that. He's our future at linebacker. So I think the pathway is there. The easiest pathway for him is if he comes in a little more closer to a linebacker size, embraces that. It wouldn't shock me at all if that guy was starting at linebacker as a true freshman, just the way they made a way to get Anthony Hill on the field. This is that type of talent.
I think that's his easier path catch, but I don't think he wants to do it.
I agree.
And honestly, I'm like you. I think you said you like him as a safety. I just think as a safety, his instincts and his just ability to bait players and bait quarterbacks and make plays on the ball and his return capabilities when he does make an interception. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think his easiest path to playing time is at linebacker, but boy, the skills he has as safety and his mental makeup at safety are, I think, what make him so special.
I think he's a unique weapon that, quite frankly, could transcend the idea of safety linebacker.
Yeah. Maybe he may revolutionize the role.
At least for Texas, we conventionally think of that star position as like the nickel corner. And I don't know, depending on defenses, they've got positions like this for guys, bandit linebackers that are really big safeties that are just used in nickel or dime a little bit more so because of the size he brings to the table. The player that I compared him to was former Dallas Cowboy, should-be Hall of Famer Darren Woodson. What's interesting about Woodson is that he shows up at Arizona State and he's a DB. In college, they had him play linebacker. But he really was one of these tweener linebacker safety types that at Arizona State, they just let him fly all over the field and make plays. But when he went to the NFL as a second-round draft pick, the Cowboys did the weird thing of spinning him back, which isn't usually what you see. You usually see the spin down. But Darren Woodson was a unique guy that even at the size he played at was able to play in the secondary. That's what I think of Jonah Williams. I think it's real easy to envision him.
I never would have thought of that one. That's a really good comp, yeah.
Thank you. It may have something to do with the fact that I absolutely adore and love Darren Woodson. So I've been waiting my entire adult life to compare a Texas player to Darren Woodson. But I think he's talented enough that the coaches 6 months from now, 8 months from now will get maybe a taste of him in spring football, or they'll just know based on what they're getting in this. He's a guy they're going to want to find a way to put on the field. These guys like Jonah Williams win you football games. And sometimes, we spent a lot of time last year wondering, what are they going to do with Anthony Hill? Are they going to use him as a pass rusher? Is he going to play edge? Is he going to play a linebacker? Now they've got him playing Mike linebacker. Sometimes, man, you just put dudes on the field and let them go. Kind of the Harold Perkins thing too. Don't put a position on the guy. Just let him go play somewhere on the field and he will make plays and make you better. I wouldn't be shocked if the way we think about the Texas defense changes a little bit with the addition of Jonah Williams. They will be able to use him in a different capacity than anybody else they have on the defensive roster at the back end of the defense. With all due respect to Derek Williams, and I would say Jelani McDonald is a version of Jonah Williams at his absolute apex. If he could touch it, I could see some of the same things. I don't quite see Phil Sammy the exact same way. So I think Jonah Williams may change the way Texas operates a little bit by any means necessary to get this guy on the field.
Yeah, Jelani, I've seen him, but he's 6'2", he's 205. Yeah, in high school he was much more lean, I think, than Jonah.
I saw your photos in the photo gallery.
Yeah.
I was like, man, you had 10 pounds of that guy. You go play Will linebacker.
Yeah. So I'm so distracted. My phone's going crazy. But, in the deal catch we were talking about, I saw someone in the chat, is this one where you have to worry about him or is he going to shut it down? Jonah's a kind of a no-nonsense kind of guy. And I watch Urlacher at New Mexico. Okay, yeah, that's an interesting comp.
Can we do that? I didn't know that Urlacher's film from the New Mexico days was readily available. If so, I want to watch that.
Yeah, I'm going to go on YouTube tonight. But Jonah, you mentioned it. He still hasn't even taken his Texas official visit. So to me, that bodes well for Texas. I mean, we were told even had he committed elsewhere, we heard
he was still going to take a visit.
Month ago. Yeah, he was going to take a Texas visit. So, I think listen, had he committed to LSU or Texas A&M, I think the chances of a flip to Texas would have been much higher than those schools getting him to flip from Texas, because he still has that Texas official visit that he'll take probably he signs in December. He may take it, I don't know when he'll take it, to be honest with you. He may take it in the fall, or he may try to take it in December after he signs. But I don't think you'll see a lot of shenanigans with Jonah Williams flipping.
Overweight Lover for $4.99 says, should we be concerned that Terry Joseph doesn't have a single recruit in this recruiting class? Will he even be here next year?
They've got it's a concern. I mean, they got Caleb Chester committed, so he does have one. I don't know. I think there are multiple guys that were recruiting Caleb Chester for this staff, but Kobe Black last year, that he's had some good moments, but
Malik Muhammad. I mean, it's not like they haven't recruited the corner position well.
Yeah, this year they have not knocked it out of the park for sure. I think Caleb Chester is a good player. I mean, he's only a 3-star prospect, but I don't know if you saw that. Well, yeah, you posted it on Orange Bloods, catch that interception he made in their scrimmage. I mean, that dude's just a baller. So, it's not like Terry Joseph it's not like that position is void of talent on the Texas roster. He's done a really good job. This recruiting cycle has been a bit of a struggle.
I think the thing that when we talk about corners, though, so let's talk about the best corners in the state right now. And I want to make sure I don't forget anybody. Devin Sanchez is the top guy. And that kid decided pretty early on that he loved Ohio State. Texas ended up not even being a factor in his recruitment, strangely enough. I wonder exactly where Texas sits in the hallways of North Shore High School these days, given they haven't had a lot of success there in recent years. You had the Chris Ross thing happen last year, and they didn't get a sniff of Devin Sanchez. Beyond that, they missed out on Dorian Brew, and he was always a guy that it felt like Texas was behind on. Everybody thought he was going to Ohio State. He goes to Oregon. I think that's one, if you're Texas, that may be the one that you look at and go, Terry Joseph, come on. That's the one maybe you needed to get. There were 2 super blue chip corners, Sanchez and Brew. And then when you go beyond that, they kind of made the decision on Kobe Sellers that they weren't going to put the gas down and accelerate on his recruitment, really open the door for A&M to go get him. But I think that if you were to have a private conversation with Sarkisian about that and say, well, what about Kobe Sellers? I think he would say, what about Kobe Sellers? In the end, we didn't press the gas on that one. And then it's Dayon Petaway, another kid that's committed to A&M, another kid that Texas really didn't spend a lot of time on. Cortland Guillory commits to Oklahoma, number 28 in the state. For me, anyway.
They offered him, but they didn't really press for Guillory either. So
the only real corner they've sweated in state for a variety of reasons was Dorian Brew, and they didn't win that battle, and that's fair to say. Terry Joseph, Oregon came in and took your cornbread on that one, but Sanchez never really materialized as a realistic option.
They missed on Aiden Anding today. Treston Castro is a guy they brought in for an official visit. He's committed to USC.
They've looked more out of what I was going to get to. They've looked more out of state.
Cade Phillips is kind of a corner, and he flipped to LSU, so that's a miss. They've targeted some out-of-state guys and just haven't been able to close the deal. I mean, but again, if we're looking just at this year, no, it's been a subpar cornerback recruiting.
He's got to do better.
Yeah, he's got to do better, but you can't forget what he's done last year and the year before, and that room looks pretty good in terms of the talents on the roster. But you can't have multiple years where you only have one quarterback and it's a 3-star guy. I mean, listen, I like Caleb Chester, but you've got to have some of these high-profile guys. You can't go back-to-back years without landing those guys.
And I think it might be as simple as that. I think if the team's really good on the field, I can't imagine that Steve Sarkisian would punish him off of one season. Yeah. But if moving forward, the recruiting from this season and if there's no Kobe Black in 2026, no Malik Muhammad, no combination of maybe a couple of guys like that, I think the thing that you'd point out about Terry Joseph is he's not a good enough recruiter that if you decide we're going to go across the country and try to get guys, he's not that good. I mean, you don't automatically go, oh, Terry Joseph's on the case. Say no more. It's not, he's solid. He's a good recruiter, but he's not one of these guys that's a bird dog that's just going to go win anywhere. I think Jason and I are kind of on the same page. I don't think it's the kind of thing that you need to freak out about, but it is important to note that this class hasn't materialized the way that you would like it to. And as Jason said, can't have repeats of this. You can, when you've got some skins on the wall, you can have a year like this and say, okay, you get a get out of jail card, circumstances. But I think
they're offensive line recruiting before who was the under Herman? Herb Hand. Like, you can't have 2 or 3 of these years.
Exactly.
That'll get you run out of town, deservedly so. But you can absorb 1 year. We have 1, maybe 2 corners, but he needs to knock it out of the park next recruiting.
And the portal could be the great equalizer. If they ever needed to go into the portal, you think about a guy like the Muhammad kid out of Washington this year. They were really interested in him.
They brought in 2 portal guys, right? Gavin Holmes and the kid this year from Cali. So
yeah, but they haven't gone out and gotten the whale.
Right.
And they've kicked the tires on those guys, and they just decided we're not going to spend that amount of money on Muhammad out of Washington. I think there were multiple reasons behind that, but ultimately they had a chance. Oregon did what they had to do. Kudos to them. You won't find me hating on Oregon because they've decided, well, if you're not going to do it, we will do it. Uncle Phil says it's okay. Watch what happens in the offseason in the portal. Still, you're going to get Malik Muhammad back again next year. You've got Kobe Black coming in. So, you think about Jahdae Barron and Gavin Holmes are the 2 guys this year that will battle on the outside. But you should have Gilbo coming back. I can't imagine that he's so good this year that he would turn pro, even if it's on the table. He could do that. But on paper, they look pretty hellacious next year in the secondary in a starting lineup. If I told you right now, Malik Muhammad, Kobe Black, Jalen Gilbo, and at the back end, some combination of Derek Williams, Jelani McDonald, Xavier Filsaime, or the commitment today, Jonah Williams, that feels like a bunch of guys that someday should play in the NFL. So, I think they're okay at the top end. I don't think that they have this class. I think would have been a depth class because whoever they would have that would come in at the cornerback position will be behind Malik Muhammad, presumably would be behind a Kobe Black would be in year 2 next year. I think the scary thing is that the depth behind those 2 guys at cornerback, that's where it's not good enough. Like it's hard to know exactly who their third guy will be next year. Although Javion Cole, the kid from San Jose State who came in as a transfer, he's got 2 years of eligibility, so he'll be in that mix. But if you look at the corners, I'll tell you what, I guess we're forgetting a couple of names because they also have Warren Robertson, who, although he hasn't gotten on the field, people talk about him like he's pretty good. Then you've also got Santana Wilson, who's relatively new, wasn't here for the spring. I think it has a chance to be a tremendous player. And then you've got Wardell Mack. So they actually have got some guys in the secondary that we haven't completely accounted for. They'll come back next year with 7 corners before they would bring anybody else. And right now that would be Caleb Chester. So they're going to be fine at cornerback. It'll be the next year where Gilbo and Cole definitely come off the books, and Malik Muhammad would be eligible for the NFL draft, where they could lose a real lion's share of the secondary potentially in the 2025 season. But I think they're okay. Like if I'm Terry Joseph and somebody yelled at me on the street corner, Jason, "Yo, Terry, what's up with your position? You suck at recruiting." I think he would go, "I suck at recruiting." And I think he'd start rattling off names and say,
"Look at our depth chart." Yeah.
Look at our depth chart. I got Santana Wilson and Wardell Mack running 3rd string. Who else has that good of talent running 3rd string? And touche, coach. Mm-hmm. Touche. Jason, let's put a ribbon and bow on this. And let's go back to Jonah. I'm going to I'm just going to ask you a few questions and you can fill in the end of the sentences. This commitment for Texas means what?
Good question. It's pretty broad. This commitment for Texas means they're back on track, I think. If they didn't get Jonah Williams, I kind of said he was kind of the swing piece, right? Like if this is going to be a top 5 class, I think it almost had to include Jonah Williams on the commitment list. We kind of started sensing, Catch, this was trending Texas's way after that late July visit. But I never felt comfortable saying he's going to Texas until late this week. We're kind of like, okay. And then certainly today we're like 100% locked. We kind of, heard it from multiple people. So, but there was still some doubt in my mind. I think when I wrote my column, my 3-2-1 column was actually last Sunday. I wrote it. I didn't post it till Tuesday, but I wrote it on Sunday. I put him at 51% to Texas. So I was like, hey, I don't know. I said, I think it's Texas, but I don't know. So this one to me was still kind of touch and go up until, yesterday. And then certainly today we knew. But to me, this gets Texas back on track. All these people were worrying about why is Texas closer to 20 than they are to top 10 or top 5. And I'm like, well, it's a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate question. But now they're hovering around that top 10. People in the chat, I've seen it about Jamie French. Yes, Paxton, my future cast is on Texas for Jamie French. I feel wonderful about that future cast. So, they get Jonah today. If they get French next week, they got Nick Brooks yesterday. They've got Khalil Lockett a couple weeks ago. I mean, this suddenly is looking like another top 5 recruiting class for Texas. Okay. So, but without Jonah Williams, I don't think we'd be saying that. So to me, this gets them back on track, heading the right direction.
It's funny. You and I come from slightly different places on this Jonah Williams thing. I was talking to one of my sources, the Wolf. Oh, I always send out a wolf call so everybody will know exactly. So this has been a really good source for me. And he mentioned, from an NIL perspective, they weren't talking to anybody. And he let me know there's one guy in the month of August that they're going to have an NIL that did it with DeCorian Moore. Everybody else are waiting to have the big NIL conversations. But he told me there would be a big NIL conversation at some point in the month of August. I assumed it was Fasusi. I did
too. When you told me this conversation, I was like, oh, it's got to be Fasusi, right? So
he didn't give me a name, didn't give me a position. He was just, FYI, there's one guy that is a little different. We're going to make sure that no chances are taken. So for a week, I thought it was Fasusi. And I think look, I'll be honest. I'm like baby's dad in Dirty Dancing. When I'm wrong, I typically, if I know I'm wrong, I will say I'm wrong. When I don't think I'm wrong, but I'm wrong, I will fight you tooth and nail. But when I know I'm wrong, I'll say it. About a week after that happened, I was communicating with the same source, and there was a real vote of low confidence on Fasusi. Source told me, I have zero confidence in signing Fasusi. And I thought, well, I guess they haven't had a freaking NIL discussion with that kid. And I can't remember the timeline on this, but at some point I was told they felt really good about Williams. So much so, I was told if they don't get Jonah Williams, then they don't know what they're doing. They've got no feel for the pulse of what's happening in 2025 recruiting. That I think they felt like, you know what, we've anticipated the things that have happened. We haven't liked them all, but we haven't been caught off guard, flat-footed by anything that's happened. I think the Jonah Williams one was the test, because I think going back to late July, they felt like we are getting Jonah Williams. And we think we're getting ready to go on a run that's going to Josiah Sharma flips. And then, they did pick up the offensive lineman yesterday, Nick Brooks. And then they're feeling really good about Jamie French. And then, I'll be honest, I have not personally had a lot of sources bring up Michael Terry. I'm not telling you either yes or no on that. I'm just saying that of the guys I've had specifically mentioned to me, they've kind of felt like this is where we're going. And oh, by the way, I think they think they're going to flip a couple of guys. I would point to a guy like Myron Charles and say, just keep an eye on that one, because when the Sanders kid committed to A&M at defensive tackle, nobody that I talked to related to Texas football so much as blinked. It was like, we're going to be okay at defensive tackle. And Sharma, I think, so clearly they're number one. Whether right or wrong, their evaluation of Sharma is off the charts good. They think he's their number one guy. They flip him. They get Jonah Williams. They get Jamie French. And suddenly all of that confidence is very, very high behind the scenes. I think is warranted. But had they missed on Jonah Williams, the show we would be doing right now, and we would be saying, look, we think they're going to get Jamie French, but like we officially have reached the stage where who they think they felt good with has not ever materialized really in this class. So I think Williams was a big test for the overall picture that behind the scenes they've been drawing for themselves. And I think they would tell you, we've got a couple of big more recruitments to come, maybe by the end of this month. Certainly Jamie French next weekend. Texas, I think, is a prohibitive favorite there. They think they're going to flip a couple of guys. They think they're going to kill it in the portal. And I think they feel like, man, if you add all of that up together, it's a pretty damn good recruiting class. It's not everything that we would want or need, but I think from an NIL standpoint, they feel like it's left them a lot potentially to go into the portal and get some guys that might be able to immediately play in 2025. So I'm telling you, like I was willing, Jason, that kid had put on an A&M hat. Because I had somebody text me this week. I flat out ignored them. Partly because the last time this person communicated with me, they cursed me out. For whatever reason, sometimes when people think they've got information, they will text me whether they've called me names or not. And this guy said, Jonah Williams to A&M, 700,000K. And I thought, okay, well, whatever. I'm gonna file that away. And if I so much as hear a whisper of A&M in the last week or two, I'll ring the alarm in our Teams channel and say, Jason, I'm hearing A&M, and somebody told me and I didn't really trust it, but now we've heard it a second time. It never happened. It was always a real strong Texas vibe. None of the other reporters covering this for other schools, regardless of whether it's Rivals or Texags or On3 or whomever.
I had an LSU reporter hit me up today like, hey, should I have a story ready or you think it's Texas? I'm like, yeah, dude, don't waste your time. I feel pretty good. So.
Yeah, and the thing is, if it doesn't go that way, a lot of times, unless the coaching staffs are telling the losing schools, right? Like A&M finds out it's not them and they tell.
But Jonah did not tell the coaches.
I know.
Like he even said, hey, Sark, I have not talked to Sark. You know, it's like when he announced. So.
He may not have talked to Sark, but I'm telling you, something was conveyed behind the sines that people feel.
Sark knew, but he didn't hear it from Jonah. Yeah. Exactly.
And Jonah didn't officially say, whatever the gray area is of conveying I'm with you. And I'm telling you, the I'm with you may have been his parents or his agents talking behind the scenes, feeling like, okay, from an NIL perspective, everything that we want, the conditions for which, if Jonah's going to come to a school, how's it going to work out? But even the Texas baseball coaches, as of today, from what we had heard, weren't taking it for granted that earlier today that Jonah Williams was going to come to Texas. So he has done a really good job. But I'm telling you, had somebody late July basically put their reputation on the line and say, if that doesn't happen, we don't know what the fuck we're talking about. Ignore us, because at that point, we will have gotten the pulse of that situation incredibly wrong. So I'm kind of thankful that Jonah Williams picked Texas so that I don't have to forever ignore a source who's otherwise been really good to me. But 2025's been a little squirrely. And I think the one thing, Jason, that everybody behind the scenes at Texas will agree to is, and just because you feel some way 48 hours before an announcement, in 2024, 48 hours is a long time until the announcement. And, you saw it with Josiah Sharma before he committed to Oregon, that it looked like it was going to be Texas. And then it was like, what the hell just happened? There were a lot of Texas people that were, Oregon must have come out with NIL guns ablazing, that they flipped that late, that mom wasn't happy. But, these things can't happen in 2024. So there was always that with Jonah. It was in the last 48 hours, does Oregon or does LSU or does A&M, an A&M squad, by the way, that for me, their highest ranked prospect in the state this year is Keody Armstrong. I have him at 13th in the state. I think Rivals has him at 8, but they've recruited okay. But nobody talks about the fact that their super blue chip recruiting could be a lot better too.
They have Keody at 13. Rivals
gave him at 13. That's right. Because I mentioned this. I think Marshall Levinson the other day. Thank you for correcting me. I had mentioned that Marshall tweeted out of the top 18 guys or the top 8 guys from the state of Texas that Longhorns didn't have any commitments. But if you'd said who A&M doesn't have any of the top 12, and before Fasusi committed on whatever the hell day it was, Wednesday,
yeah.
Oklahoma didn't have anybody in the top 20. It really speaks to Texas's reputation, the bar that Texas is expected to reach, that going into Wednesday, neither Texas A&M or Oklahoma had really connected with a mega recruit from in-state. It's so weird. I cannot look back and point to any year that it's completely like this, where and you can even include LSU in that list as well. I mean, the 4 schools that we think of regionally in the state of Texas, depending on the area of the state, really having feet on the ground and flagpoles in the ground and kind of known, well, if a guy goes from there, then he goes to this school. It just hadn't happened yet. So for Texas, this was really big because in a week from now, they're going to be inside the top 10 of the Rivals rankings. And I think the thing that if Jonah Williams doesn't do it, Jason, and I'll let this be my final thought, and we can wrap up with some closing thoughts and say goodbye. If there's any other super chats, I'll make sure that we didn't miss them. In fact, I see one from Barb's 10 that I'll get to in just a second. This should stop the what's wrong with Texas recruiting. That in a week from now, they're going to have at least one 5-star committed, depending on the service. Jamie French is ranked in a certain kind of way, but everybody believes he's a super blue chip. They'll be inside the top 10 in the Rivals rankings, and I think most of the various services rankings. So I think even though this is a Texas recruiting class that we know could be better, we know that there's some real badass prospects, primarily in state, that Texas would love to have in this class, and they don't. I think the negative conversation, though, will stop.
Yeah, I think so. We've seen it on Orange Buzz, a lot of hand wringing, but I think that will stop. We'll get to the super chat here. Do you know, I just looked, Catch. Do you know in the top 100 in the state of Texas, take a guess, how many guys are uncommitted in the top 100?
15.
2.
Oh, my God.
Yes, dude. Michael Terry and
I should have known that. I feel like I've
Leon DeBlanc at number 95 is the only other one that's uncommitted.
That's wild.
Incredible. Yes.
But I'm telling you, the Texas people behind the scenes believe – I tell you, here's what they believe. They believe there's going to be more flips than ever before, and it's made me think to myself, I may not put in future casts moving forward, because if these guys are all – they're all, if the system is set up, it's like, oh, you got it. Like, pick anybody. But, Cade Phillips is a good example. Okay, so you pick Texas for Cade Phillips, and then he flips to LSU.
Even though he knew he was going to flip. it counts as a loss for us.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if it's about to go haywire in the state of Texas and guys just start flipping in such a way that it doesn't make any sense to put in future casts before the end of the summer, it will at least be something that I give consideration to. Anyway, Barb says, just joining a little late, but thanks for the show. If not Terry Joseph, then who is on your wish list? Does Jonah trigger any flips? Let's start with the last question first. I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, listen, most of these guys, we just said it, their minds are, for the most part, made up. I think Jamie French's mind is made up. Does this help you with someone like Michael Terry? Probably not. But
I think it helps with a guy like Jamie French or Terry in the sense that
momentum.
So it's like I'm not going by myself. So
I'm not going to a program that's going to struggle 3 years. This Texas thing's still cooking. So yeah, I mean, it might help a little bit in that perception, but I don't think it moves the needle. On the Terry Joseph, I don't understand the question, like who's on, like as far as a coach.
I think it's a cornerback who is on the dream team list for college cornerbacks. Boy, that's a great question. Barbs, it's not a bad question. I don't have anybody off the top of my head. That the problem with most of those guys is the guys that you would want, I guarantee you'll be like, oh, the guy at Ohio State, or
Corey Raymond at LSU is really good.
Now Corey Raymond would be one of the names I think that would be on the list, but he's kind of bounced around a little bit. I just ended up back at LSU. He's an incredible recruiter. He's an incredible developer of talent. I was a little surprised that he was even on the market there for a little while before going back to LSU. I'll say him just because I've said him before, but I'll be honest. I'm not. If Chris Del Conte has a list of head coaches that he keeps at all times in the event of a coaching change, I have to be honest. I do not have a cornerback coaching list on a crib sheet anywhere, Jason, that you lean on and go, oh, I wrote this down 7 months ago. I'm so glad you asked.
No. Corey Raymond's about the only one I can think of. Yes. Dwayne Aquino? Can I put Dwayne Aquino on there? I don't know.
Well, exactly.
No, I mean, but hey, I'm all for like young, up and coming guys who are just badass recruiters. I mean,
and we know that Sark will go to the NFL too.
Yeah.
That if the answer was he plucked some guy from the Jacksonville Jaguars assistant coaching staff, whether he's an assistant to the assistants or an assistant on-field coach, I mean, Sark's done enough now and gone into different areas where, honestly, Sark's talent pool is probably much wider than we give it credit for. I think the hire of the defensive tackle coach this past season was proof of that. There's no way anybody had that name on a list. Sark didn't give a damn. Whatever Sark's list is, it wouldn't be our list anyway. So I don't know if there's any reason for us to worry about our list. I promise Sark's got some list somewhere and it's got a bunch of names on it that you and I probably don't know, but he does that. And you know what? He gets paid wait, if Sukamel and I were making $10 million a year, I'd be like, Jason, God damn it.
You better have a list.
It's our job to know who the short list is, but we don't. So I'm not going to hang us out to dry quite that much. Jason, any final thoughts? I don't see any other super chats.
No. I got actually an audio interview sent to me today, or just a few minutes ago. So I'm going to listen to that, see what Jonah had to say. I'll pop some notes on Orange Bloods and then probably flesh out the actual interview maybe for my column on Monday. But no, man, just a big day. I mean, big night for Texas. Huge momentum getter. And I think this just eases. There's been a lot of nervous moments on Orange Bloods and on our message board with just fans like, what's going on? What's going on with recruiting? And I think getting Jonah Williams eases a lot of those concerns, and I'm fully expecting more good news next week on Friday with Jamie French.
It's completely fair. I mean, right or wrong, there was a perception, and look, we may have had it wrong the whole way with a guy like Riley Pettyjohn, but fans had been told from all over the place, not like just from Orange Bloods. I think there was a consistent vibe amongst all recruiting services that Texas leads for Riley Pettyjohn, and then when DeCorey Moore decommitted from LSU, the thought process was that kid's going to Texas. And then you think about Michael Fasusi. There was a time when OU was the leader, and then A&M came in, but then it felt like after the Texas visit that the Longhorns had really made a big impression there. And in the end, he doesn't commit to the Longhorns either. So I get it. Today helps. Today, the world gets righted a little bit. You were told for most of the week, yeah, you could actually make plans to be on your computer at 6:30 on Saturday. We didn't do that with Fasusi on Wednesday. Someone pointed that out on Orange Bloods. We didn't have an official Michael Fasusi thread pinned at the top of the board when he made his announcement.
It's so funny because I was just about to make that thread. I got a photo sent to me from the deal, and I was like, oh, Ket's already started a thread. So I put my stuff in there. But Fasusi, I'll give a little peek behind the curtain before we log off. So Fasusi's announcement was on Wednesday, and he and I had talked a couple weeks ago, and I know Fasusi pretty well, and he's like, dude, pull up to my announcement. I want you there. I'm like, all right. Well, I hit him up on Tuesday. I said, Mike, I said, I don't want to spend 6 hours on the road if you're going to commit to Oklahoma or something. And he was kind enough to tell me, like, it's not going to be Texas. So, but the point, I thought of this earlier when you were talking about your source and you're glad that the source was right. And I sent the screen capture that Fasusi sent to me, like, hey, it's not going to be Texas, to people in Austin. And they were like, oh, shit. Like, they did not know. So, I mean, you talk about, I mean, sometimes even the most connected sources kind of can misread these things. So this is one that I'm sure it feels good for people inside the football offices to say, all right, they can stick out their chest a little bit and say, okay, yeah, we felt good about this one and it came to fruition. Even maybe if Jonah didn't tell them until the last minute, they had a really good read on this one. That's good to hear.
Guys, do us a solid. Hit that thumbs up button. If you're ever going to hit thumbs up on a video on Orange Bloods Live, maybe do it on the day that a 5-star kid in-state from Galveston Ball. By the way, it's been a while since the Longhorns went out to Gal Ball.
I should be wearing my Casey Hampton jersey. Dude, why didn't I think of that? I should have worn my Casey Hampton Steelers jersey tonight, right?
I was just about to say it's the home of Casey Hampton. And when you think about the last it used to be a hotbed of talent. I can remember Lawrence Richardson coming out in 2000. And that was back in the day when, of course, there was a guy from Galveston Ball in the top 5 or top 10. Then it felt like we went a long time until Mike Evans. And Mike Evans came out of nowhere. He didn't even start playing football until his high school senior year in high school. And so it was a great evaluation by A&M. But Texas has not been heavily involved in Galveston Ball, really, for very much over the course of the last couple of decades when it used to be a mainstay of Texas constantly being in there. So Texas back in Galveston Ball. We'll see what that means in the long-term future. But having Jonah Williams, there may be kids at Galveston Ball that don't even know who Casey Hampton is. So as crazy as that might sound, Jonah Williams is in the here. It's in the now. It will mean a lot for a long time, presuming they keep Jonah Williams. But I have a feeling this won't be a recruitment where that's too much of a problem. But then again, I've thought a bunch of stuff about the 2025 recruiting class, and a whole bunch of it's been wrong. So maybe don't write that part in ink. But today is an ink-worthy kind of a day. You can write it was a massive day for Texas Longhorn football, and that doesn't change. For myself and Jason Sukamo, appreciate a little bit of time on a Saturday night. You guys have a great weekend. When we get back on Monday, by God, it's game week. Should be fun. I don't know if you guys know this. Texas ranked in the top 5 in college football. Pretty high expectations. Go check them all out over at orangebloods.com. The conversation never stops, no matter the hour of the day, and the information also never stops. And occasionally we do stuff here on Orange Bloods Live. You guys have a great weekend. I'm just blabbering at this point.